So in problem number one, when we're asked to arrange these in such a way that 16 could be put into the original machine, and then as drops out of one into the next, we want to start thinking of potentially how could that be done in a way that we can kind of maybe think of without a calculator. Starting by putting the number 16 into here, I don't know that I'd want to try to, without a calculator, raise 16 to the 6th power. So let's agree to not put this one first, okay? If you look at, as you go down the list, the 6th root of 16 is also not something that I would want to try without the use of some sort of calculating device of some sort. And then we start looking at these other two, one of which, you start to analyze these a little bit. These are similar equations. The only difference being is that this one has a third root, and when you remember that the denominator of an exponent is a root as well, that's a square root. So let's look at this one first. This one here, the third root of 16, is not something that we could do without the use of a calculator. And if we wanted to square 16, we're getting into a big number again. So it really kind of boils down to this is really the only one that could nicely go in as the first one. So because the 2 on the bottom means you can take the square root first, and then you can raise it to the 3rd power. So you take 16, you take the square root of it. Let me do this, 16, and we're dumping that in there. So 16 goes in, okay? You take the square root, and then you cube it. The square root of 16 is 4, cubing it is 64. Well, then a 64 is going to dump out of here. Well, by the same argument that we used before, this would probably not be the best one to follow up. A 64 to the 6th power is going to be even bigger than 16 to the 6th power. So then it comes down to these two. And I spent some time thinking of these, so that might all seem pretty easy, but requires some thought and some trial and error, okay? So it's okay to ponder something and consider something as long as you think, okay, well, let's start eliminating the choices that don't seem to work. Well, you could take the 6th root of 64. Couldn't do that with 16, but the 6th root of 64 is 2. So that would actually be a pretty decent option to put in here. You can put that there, and then if you have a 2, well, that's a pretty easy number to actually raise to the 6th power, because that'd take us right back to where we were before. Now, think about that. These two guys, you might realize now, that turned a 64 into a 2, and then that turned a 2 back into a 64. These guys completely undid each other, okay? We'll get back to that in a second. It's now 64, so I can go back to this one and say, okay, well, this one, you take the cube root of 64, well, that happens to be 4, and then you take 4 and square it, you get 16, and lo and behold, we have 16 that kind of drops out of the bottom of this. Okay, so K, G, H, and F is one arrangement of that. And if you start thinking about, wait a second, I had a 64 dumping out of here. Well, I had a 64 dumping out of here, and I was able to use this machine. So if I go back and put this one first, that 64 that dropped out of here went back into this machine, and out comes then the cube root of 64 is 4, and then square root of 16. So another 16 is dropping out of here, and you might say, oh, well, we're back to that place where we can't do any of these two. Well, hold that thought. We couldn't before because we were just like, well, this will just by itself be a huge number, and this by itself is not a number that we can really naturally do. Hey, that's interesting. Hold that thought, because we're wrapping it up here. And thank you very much. So in this case here, what you're doing basically, if you understand that one of these cancels out the other, you can actually rearrange these in either way and have it, whatever this does, we know it's going to be a big number. Well, this is just going to undo it. So whatever that big number is, this is going to bring you back to 16. And again, if 16 is dropping out of here, I don't know what this number is either, but whatever weird number that is, if you drop it into here, it'll turn it around and turn it right back into a 16 again. So there's 3 options for you if you're still looking.